We will be having a public hearing at 6:30 regarding bylaw 1808, 2116 Downey Avenue. So council meeting still underway at that point. We will recess it briefly for that public hearing. Motion to adopt the agenda would be in order.
Move. Second.
All those in favor? Motion's carried. All right, so we'll start with delegation. We have Carol Baird here from the North Island College to give us an overview on their Plan 2020. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilors, for allowing me to come and speak with you for a few minutes. I'll keep my remarks brief to allow as much time as possible for questions afterwards. I have three purposes for being with you today. First, to make you aware that the North Island College is developing a new college-wide plan that's going to guide our operations and development over the next 5 years, out to the year 2020. We also would like to invite your input, feedback, and questions regarding the draft plan. And I believe in your package there's been some material circulated that kind of gives you some background on some of the work we're doing. And thirdly, to offer the possibility of having a more in-depth conversation with you at a later date. My visit with you today is one of about 20 such presentations that college is making between now and the end of the May with municipal and regional governments, school boards, chambers of commerce, and other stakeholder groups and partner organizations across the North Island. John Bowman, who can't be here today, is much more polished in this presentation than I am, so I'm reading from the notes and I apologize for that. But we're very interested in learning more about what our communities and stakeholders think the college is doing well, and also what we need to focus on for improving or changing over the next several years. 2015 is going to be a very important year for us and for post-secondary students in the region. In addition to developing the new plan, we're looking forward to some very significant and positive developments related to programs, services, and facilities. We'll be marking our 40th anniversary later this year, and it's going to be a great time to celebrate our history, reflect with pride on the college's progress and achievements, and to look forward to a very bright future. In developing the college's new plan, we're building on the success and directions established by the NIC Strategic Plan 2011 to 2015, and have also utilized a comprehensive environmental scan to identify 9 strategic priorities and an extensive list of related goals. As I mentioned, you've got the copy of our environmental scan highlights and the draft strategic priorities and goals in your package. I don't have time to speak to all of those today, but I would like to mention 3 very quickly. The first is access to learning and services across the region. People at NIC are passionate about our regional mandate and mission commitment to provide close-to-home programs and services, both through face-to-face on-campus programs and through instructor-led in-community delivery where NIC does not have permanent facilities. Your college has been and continues to be a provincial leader in the use of educational technologies to provide programs and services via distant education. Secondly, active community connections to community. Relationships are critically important to the college. Collaboration and partnership with other organizations, businesses, and industry are key to us. They help us to maximize the quality and quantity of opportunities for North Islanders. We recognize the importance of growing and strengthening those connections in the coming years. We are constrained by our limited financial capacity to offer the range and depths of programs and services that are needed in the communities. Regrettably, over the last few years, the provincial government's core base funding to the college system and NIC has been significantly reduced. Narrowly targeted and one-time funding from the province is becoming more prevalent. The need to diversify our revenue and encourage non-government investments in learning and skills programs and in infrastructure will become even more important to sustaining and enhancing our capacity in the medium and long term. For NIC, community involvement, input, and feedback is very important. We need and want to hear from as many people and organizations as possible as we develop the plan. The feedback we receive regarding the draft priorities and goals will be considered before the college plan is finalized and approved by our board of governors at the end of June. So we've created 3 avenues to allow people to participate in the process. First, we have an online document and a feedback survey system which anyone can provide their input to. It's through the NIC website, NIC Plan 2020, and I think the web address is in your materials as well. That's an anonymous survey, and it will it just goes directly to the people that are working on the plan. We've had a series of public meetings. The one in Comox actually was last week. Unfortunately, today's presentation didn't line up very well with that. And thank you, I saw Mayor Ives at that town hall meeting. And the third area is we would like to have a follow-up meeting with organizations and councils to enable a more detailed and broad-based discussion regarding the college, our planning for the future and regional needs. So thank you very much. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Any questions from members of the council? Councillor Price.
Yes, and thank you for your presentation. I'd just like to start by saying that we're very lucky to have the college in our community, and both my kids spent some time there. My son in trades and my daughter did a year of a business degree, so it was very handy to make it complicated. And so it was around the trades I was going to ask you. In your package where it talks about job openings by skill levels up to 2022 projections, it didn't seem to bring out trades specifically in that. And I had always assumed that that would be an area where we would need to be training people in the future in a very significant numbers.
We absolutely need tradespeople, and it's part of the province's blueprint for jobs. And we are, in fact, having more trades programs this year. Our trades programs are at capacity, almost all of them, and we've had wait lists, and we've received additional funding to help deal with some of those. The list in there is really based on a provincial list that was prepared, and we look at the top vacancies that are coming up and how the post-secondary system as a whole can work towards meeting what they see as the pending shortfall in a number of areas, including trades. But trades is definitely, as a grouping of programs, one of the ones that we're really focusing on.
Councillor McKinnon.
Yes, again, thanks for the presentation. I wanted you to comment on the number of international students that are at North Island College, and besides the goodwill that's created in international cultural understanding, I know that also the numbers, there's an economic benefit to communities for the large numbers, but can you give us the actual numbers attending now, approximately?
Oh boy, I'm a numbers person, but I'm terrible with numbers off the top of my head. I think with the year just ended, I think we were at around just over 250 full-time equivalent international students, and that's been tremendous growth. We really, starting in about 2010, we brought in a position, executive director of international, that can really focus on building that cohort of students, and we've really seen growth from almost nothing to that in really a relatively short time. And this last year, we saw tremendous growth from the year before. So, and I think we're now at the point where we're looking at, starting to think about, well, how many international students is the right number for the college? What kind of programs are they going to be looking for in the future, so that we can find the right balance of, we don't want to have, disproportionate numbers in programs, but we've got to meet those needs. One of the good news stories in terms of the college is that revenue, in addition to providing support for the college, it's actually funded additional programs and sections for programs, so that it's meant areas where we've had some wait lists in some of the university transfer areas, some of the business programs. We've actually been able to put on additional sections, which has also provided additional seats for domestic students and local students as well. Did that answer your question?
It did, and I know I had heard a figure once thrown out that what the economic amount that is brought to the community by our national students at North Island College and at the secondary schools. And it was an amazing figure.
It's tremendous, because they're in the community, they're living on their own or with people and groceries and all the things that they bring. And what we're looking at is not only having international students come to us, but we're wanting to build more capacity in the college to have our students go and have international experience. And we think that also having international students on campus is providing a real, it's broadening the education for our students as well. Their introductions to other cultures, and it's been really very positive for us.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Margrand and then Martin Swift.
Hi, Carol. Thank you very much for your presentation. It's excellent. Willis College. I notice on here under your college values, I'm going to cheat and read a little bit here. Access. We ensure access to learning opportunities regardless of geographic, technological, financial, social, educational, historic barriers. We've been working a lot over the last 7 years with homelessness in the valley. And of course, a lot of these people are homeless because they lack skills training. Is there any kind of a connection between the services that serve the homelessness and North Island College to try to fill that gap?
I wouldn't say that there's a direct connection that I'm aware of, although we're very interested in that and have had a number of sort of working groups and things that kind of look at those things. But in terms of actually reaching out as to provide education to them, not specifically directed, but we do have a lot of supports for people that need them, either whether they have learning disabilities, financial problems, things like that. So that, and some of that addresses the needs of that group of people. But I'll make a note because I'll bring that comment back as something we should maybe think about as we're going forward. How we can make those linkages, because there's a number of organizations in the valley that are working very hard.
There you are. Yeah. Thanks, Carol.
Councillor Swift?
Thanks for your report, Carol. I found it really interesting. Lots of information in here. I was a little bit disappointed and alarmed to learn that we don't get the funding that other rural colleges get. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that at all.
Sure. So the table in the report is really talking about funding on a per capita basis. So it's not about the funding per student. That is done in a different way around full-time equivalents, and different kinds of programs are funded in different ways. But what that is intended to do is look at this. We have a very large region. It really runs from Pelican Beach up to the north end of the island, and in fact Bella Coola and that area as well, and out to the west coast. So. And we have a lot of small communities, a lot of disparate communities spread throughout. And when you take our population and divide it by our funding, that's the number that's in that report. And when you do the same exercise for other similar colleges, you can see how much lower we are even than the average. And we do that comparison against other colleges that are more have larger rural regions, serving usually they're multi-campus based, they serve these smaller communities, rather than trying to compare ourselves to the larger urban centers where their issues are kind of different. So that I guess the point that statistics make is that we just don't feel that as a region the college is funded at the level that's consistent with other areas, which would provide us more funding to be able to do more programs and services, especially in some of the smaller communities. Thank you.
Great. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much for your time.
All right, we have minutes of meetings for receipts. First of all, the special council meeting minutes of May 5th.
Move. Second.
On approval of those minutes, all those in favor?
I just have a comment. It's just the wrong location.
Okay, well, that's fair. We should make that change. It was at the rectangle. Not the stair. Okay, we'll fix that. Did that change anything further? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Okay, regular council meeting minutes of May 6th for approval.
Move. Second.
Approval then, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Great, so management report at page 49 for
Move receipt.
receipts.
Second.
Okay, on receipt then, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Any questions or anything from that? Seeing none, we'll move on. We have a report starting at page 51 on the extension of the Omox Downtown Revitalization Program. Recommendations from the planner to give some readings, so certainly can have the planner back, there he is, to talk about some of the details of that proposed extension for 1 year. There may be questions that members of council have. So anything further you wish to add to the report, Brian?
This all comes in direction to extend the program for 1 year. And nested inside the program are a series of cascading dates, all built on the original 1-year deadline for submissions.
Right.
So what this really does is changes the 1 year, gives it an additional 1 year of operation, and then changes all those cascading dates.
Right.
That's why you're seeing more than one amendment to the bylaw. And it still keeps into account the 6-month review.
Okay.
So we would have another 6-month review after the adoption of the bylaw, if it went forward.
So application could be submitted if the year extension is granted by July 1 of 2016.
360.
Correct.
And then there's a 4-year process there for eligibility in terms of occupancy. Okay. Any questions?
I just have a
Councilor
question.
Swift?
This is just clarification. Does it have to be mixed use, or can it be strictly residential?
It can't be strictly residential.
Okay.
It just has to be a minimum of 50% residential. So it can't be more
Oh,
than
okay.
50%.
Okay, good question. Councilor Price?
On the top of page 59, to add to section 7 on application fees, when it talks about the 50% refunding of the application fee paid in the bylaw, I just wondered whether that had any financial implication. I mean, often there's a lot of work involved with the applications. And secondly, do you think that it's going to make a significant difference as an incentive?
I believe as an incentive, the value of the programs is to show that council is serious about this, and that's the real value. And so I think it does have an impact in that. In terms of the financial impact, council has budgeted $50,000 for the life of the program in terms of reduced building permit fees and the waiving of building permit fees. And the larger impact on that is going to be the waiving of the building permit fees. So this would be a rather small impact in comparison.
And it would be reflected in that capped amount?
Yes, that's part of what we're reporting back on 6-month intervals.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so any further questions? Seeing none, we could entertain first reading of
I'll move first reading.
bylaw 1810.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. And that having given that first reading and received this report in accordance with section 226(6)B of the Community Charter, Council has considered the bylaw in conjunction with the objectives and policies set out in section 165(3)(1)C of the Community Charter and its financial plan. Move that.
I'll move that. Second.
Those in favor? Motion is carried. And at this point, then, the bylaw number 1810 can be given second and third reading.
Move. Second.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. And the planning procedures amendment bylaw 1811 can be given first, second, and third reading.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion is carried. So that would then come before us for adoption in early June.
June 17th, I believe.
Or the 17th. Okay. Fair enough, before July 1st. Good. All right, so I think that deals with the unfinished business. We are now at special reports. So for receipt, the first quarter, March 31st financial statement.
Move receipt.
Thank you.
Second.
Provided by our Director of Finance, as usual. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Another report on the mosquito abatement plan project in Kai Bay Lagoon for information receipt.
Move receipt. Second.
Any questions or comments?
How's it working so far?
Councilor
Oh,
McKinnon?
sorry.
Just a question as to how residents in those areas are being notified about this information. If you can update us there in that regard, CEO.
Prior to the implementation of the works, there was a meeting held at the Commons Community Center, and there was a combination of notices and a significant amount of word of mouth that went between the neighbors to those that were affected primarily in the areas that had the nuisance issue of mosquitoes. And once the work was completed, it appears that we didn't have to tell anybody, they just knew mosquitoes just weren't there.
And they can see the work was done.
Yeah.
All right, any further? All those in favor then? Motion's carried. At page 73, we have a report from our Director of Finance regarding support for fixed wing search and rescue training center. That's been discussed at a preliminary level, and this is some recommendations that staff have come forward with in terms of providing financial incentive for that training center. So again, if there's any questions generally or things that the CAO wishes to add to this, there is one comment there that I note that at this point the recommendation isn't to ask the province for a similar or an amount equivalent to, I guess, what would be the school taxes.
Yes.
Essentially, that we could add that to the ask, if you will.
I'd recommend that council consider that strongly. It was effective for us when we asked for payments in our appeal of the original PILT.
Sure.
And the province did assist with that, so I think it's worth the ask.
Excuse me, is it worth councillors, mayor, CAO to actually go and visit our MLA in this regard?
Oh, we would once council's
Once
passed
it,
this.
okay, good.
Absolutely. Councillor Grant and Murdoch?
Oh, yeah, no, I was just, I was talking with Economic Development Officer the other day, and he thought that it might be appropriate to send letters of support from the town to all the appropriate agencies that would be involved in this, like CFB, Comox. I'm not sure who you would send it to, the feds. I know there's a group of retired colonels around town here that were behind this, and it just shows that, you know, should we decide to do this, that we are supporting this in a big way as well.
Sure. Well, so we can certainly provide a letter to those agencies indicating what we perhaps passed.
Yep.
Certainly. Councillor Hunt?
I'm just wondering aloud if perhaps I might be in a conflict of interest with this. It's just dawned on me that I may be voting on something that would impact my employer. So I think if we come to a vote, I'll excuse myself.
Well, you have to excuse yourself for this discussion.
Yeah.
If you think, I mean, it's up to you.
I'm going to excuse myself now.
Yeah. All right. And Councillor McKinnon, do you have a question?
Just a comment about some additional information that may be helpful in this regard that I passed on to the folks that are making the application. And that is that we'll be in stiff competition for this with federally with communities from Quebec as well as elsewhere in Canada. And what I mentioned that could be a trump card in that regard, to at least put us on equal footing with Quebec centers, is that the Comox Valley not only has French immersion in the public schools here, K through 12, but we have our own Francophone federal school, K to 12 here. And the federal people making this decision should be aware of that in case members that are considering members and their families coming to our community. We're very fortunate to have that, and that puts us on equal footing with communities in Quebec, and hopefully that's taken into consideration. The feedback I got from those is that they would add that to the report as well.
Sure. Yeah, well, really, in all reality, it's likely Trent and Greenwood and Comox.
Yeah.
So I'm not aware of any particular air base in Quebec other than Bagotville, which is CF-18s, but I don't believe they do search and rescue. So it's likely to be those 3 search and rescue bases we're talking about. But certainly, I believe that CVEDS is well aware of that action.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a couple recommendations here to consider. If you're ready for those, we could move them and have further discussion.
Do we want to move both at the same time?
I think we should move them one at a time. The
First one?
Second?
That is that the town offer to pay a grant aid to 19 Winnicott Comox that be equal to the town's share of any incremental payment of tax received as a result of construction of such a center in the first 5 years. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. And the second recommendation, perhaps with an amendment?
I would move second with the amendment that we also include the province in the school taxes in this.
Okay,
I'll second that.
thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. And in terms of communicating this, CEO, what would be the game plan once we've got these, we have passed these two motions now?
Well, we'll send the correspondence to Comox Valley Economic Development Center as the society, as well as Fred Bigelow at Comox Airport, who have been spearheading this initiative. We will also then communicate to the regional district director correspondence asking them to consider this along with the background report, copies to our MLA, and send it to the province directly as well.
Okay, so as a matter of follow-up, that's what we'll be doing. I think that's probably sufficient for the time. All right. So unless there's anything further on that issue, we'll just move forward. Get Councillor Allen.
All right, we'll let you go.
Okay, so now we're at a bylaw amendment for Knight Road Sanitary Sewer Main Extension Capital Fee.
I would move first, second, and third readings.
Second that?
And that's a bit of good news in light of the reduction from 4,000 per parcel to 1,700. So that's good news for those that are affected. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. All right, for the next matter, I'll be declaring my conflict and turning over the chair to Acting Mayor Swift. And just give me a buzz when you're ready to go.
It's really cool back there. Much cooler back there.
Never have a
I
conflict.
think I'll go in.
Go for a walk.
Not too far.
Okay, so we're here for the rezoning application, RZ 14-11, and development permit application DP 1414. Can we have a motion?
Motion.
Vote? Second?
To receive the report.
Sorry?
A motion to receive the report.
To receive the report. Okay,
So that's moved and seconded.
second. And discussion?
Your Worship, I'd like to propose a motion in the spirit of compromise to help move this project along with more community support. In my motion, I'll ask that the developers return with a proposal that is 4 rather than 5 floors, and continue with the Comox by the Sea maritime theme with historical reference to the Lorne. I have copies of what the difference, the 4 floors versus 5 floors might look like, and I'd like to share that with Council and RCAO, but I need a seconder to support my motion so I can speak to it and add my comments.
I'll second it.
Okay, so for discussion?
My motion's intended to help move this important project along, taking into consideration public input. In my opinion, we need the commercial development to help trigger our revitalization, but we need to reflect the guidelines suggested in our official community plan as well and consider our public input. The OCP guidelines, to remind us, all touch on community values, town planning goals, and design criteria. I have heard, as members of council have from many on this issue, I've heard from many that want the project to go forward, but we're not crazy or in many not in support of the 5 floors on that small lot size. Hence, my idea for compromise. I have faith in our local developer that he wants to make this project the signature piece of our revitalization. However, one citizen at the public hearing said something that struck a chord with me, and that was that this building will be with us for the next 40, 50 years. And that talk a little bit more, or giving a little bit more time, let's get a little bit more time to get it right. After all, it is us on council to make sure the values, goals, and criteria in our OCP are met, and that our citizens feel we're listening and supporting our official community plan.
Could I just, implications from the planner, if we do that, we have to start the whole process all over again? That's not the case? Can't just knock the floor off and start again, that's not the way it works.
revised drawings and revised, more than likely revised zoning, because the zoning's tied to this specific building. So at minimum, what you'd be doing, you'd also, that should trigger a requirement for a second public hearing, so you'd be going back to first reading at a minimum.
And the developer would have to get all new plans and redo the entire thing. So basically, we'd be starting
Yes.
right back to the very beginning.
And I believe that would be a council's option. I mean, if you went to the beginning, then you would have the pre-consultation as well. Otherwise, if you just go back to first reading, then you just have the public hearing. Or if council wishes to hold an open house, those would be issues for council's decision.
Councillor Renal?
Through yourself to the planner, what are we looking at for the 5th floor? I believe 4 units. How many square feet are we looking at? Because it's whatever you call it, tiered. So the top floor is the smallest of the floors. So what kind of square footage are we looking at, and what kind of
I
units?
don't have that off the top at hand.
Okay, I believe it's 4 units in the top. I can't think it'd be that many square feet up there. I'm just wondering if this motion, which is nice, but I've read something in the paper that Comox is open for business, and I think sending something like this back, it doesn't send that message. And I heard some concerns at the public hearing, but I think that this process so far has been, I think it's been meaningful, I think it's been thorough, and I believe it should stand on its own merit.
Councillor Grant?
When you talk about our future for 50 years, I agree, which makes this a very, very important decision, and certainly not one that any of us take lightly, that's for sure. I have seen and heard a very organized campaign on behalf of Comox residents who are concerned about how this building will in fact impact on our community. I have also seen a less organized group who haven't been very vocal, at least not in public, but certainly have been calling me, and I'm sure others as well, saying, oh dear, dear, dear. So there obviously is a difference of opinions as to what the facade and the height of the building should be. But I think there's another point that we need to consider. First of all, I believe, CAO will confirm this for me, that we've had one application to construct the Lorne. Yes. And if in fact, with just this one application, we were to send out a message to future investors that, well, yes, we're open for business, but this is going to complicate the application, and what kind of a message does that give to future investors that we're trying to attract to our community? And past councils and staff have spent a lot of time and effort with our downtown revitalization plan. We're trying to bring business, we're trying to bring people to our downtown core. To set this back now is a negative message, and I would be very concerned about what that would do for the future of our town and how it would impact us.
Councillor McKinnon?
Thank you, Councillor Grant. I know those feelings are heartfelt by you. Just in reply to that is that I complimented the developer after our public open house when he came back with some changes addressing the historical reference to the Lorne Hotel and some of the changes in design at that time. I think we're headed in the right direction and getting close there. But what I have heard and what I did hear at the public hearing is that the size, the 5 stores on that location in Comox is something that people just don't seem to be comfortable with. And again, I'm not suggesting that I'm trying to offer a compromise that we can move forward with this project and support the things that you just suggested. I think this is a compromise that would be fit in better with the character of the downtown core there, and would send a good message as well that we want to keep our downtown community vital, and but within the framework of 4 stories at this time. 4 stories on this particular site.
Councillor Graham.
Well, I think you have to remember that you need to be financially viable if you're going to build a project. I think if you take the top floor out of this project becomes not financially viable. I think you've got a developer that's now put, I wouldn't even want to guess how much money into planning. You're going to send them right back to the drawing board to start again. This compromise, in my opinion, will kill that project, and we'll have a vacant lot sitting there for a long time in the future. I know it's all nice to do that, but I would ask, if you're going to bring compromises like this, that it should be done well earlier in the project than right at the end. We have, you know, we went through an OCP process here where we had 26 meetings on our OCP. We had 6 of them right in the downtown. That lot was identified with 4 others as one that we would look at going higher on. We didn't hear a peep from anybody at that time when we went through that. All of a sudden, when the plan comes, there's a problem with it. I think that Marg is absolutely right, that is sending a really bad message if we really truly want to revitalize our downtown. And I think that you will find that this project will no longer exist if we do that. So I think that to think that there's a compromise at the 99th percentile here is, I think that you're dead wrong, and I think that we will end up with nothing on that lot.
I appreciate your comments, Councillor Grant, and but I do recall in after past public hearings that we have compromised on some issues and gone back and made changes, and that really validates public hearings. That the input is important at that time. In this regard, I didn't anticipate that we'd have to go back to step 1. I'm not sure that we do. I'd like some further clarification on that from our CAO. But there have been instances before, when I've been on council, when after public hearing, we have made some changes and compromises to decisions.
Okay, we have Director Price and then Director Grant. And sorry, Councillor and Ron Mead. Do you have any comment before we move on?
Could I ask you to clarify your motion before I answer your question, Councillor McKenna? Just can you reread it again so I have it correctly?
I wanted to present a motion in the spirit of compromise to help move this project along. And in my motion, I'll ask for the developers to return with a proposal that is 4 rather than 5 floors, and to continue with the Comox by the Sea maritime theme and with historical reference to the Lorne. So the only change is from 5 to 4.
Okay, so you're not asking for, when you reference continue with Comox by the Sea and maritime heritage theme, you're not looking at any changes to the exterior of the design?
I would welcome enhancing of it.
Well, there's 2 separate issues here that you're referencing, and that's why I hesitate. One is the land use issue, as the planner referred to. Reduction in a story would require revised drawings and essentially going back through another public hearing process, because the change is significant enough. The other points that you referenced, the Comox by the Sea and maritime heritage theme, council needs to be very specific as to what types of changes you'd like to see to that building. I think the planner can speak to this in greater detail, but previous reports have indicated that the application generally meets the design guidelines, the criteria for design guidelines. So if council isn't satisfied with those, you have to be specific as to what the changes are going to be to meet them. And that's why there's some gray area in that. But I think the important issue right now, as you referenced, is going from 5 to 4. And so yes, we would go back to public hearing, prior to public hearing, before doing that.
Thank you for that clarification. And I made reference to the maritime theme because in the official community plan, under downtown Comox, section 3.13. It says that a plan for additional density is subject to appropriate guidelines to address massing, exterior design, color, and signage with a marine theme. A plan must have a marine theme to be considered for additional density. The marine theme is to be, Comox desires to emphasize a marine theme in its downtown to reflect its waterfront location and history. So I didn't want to lose sight of that and how important that was. I commended the developer on recognizing that after the public hearing, and I'd like that to maintain front and center, and that's certainly the message that I received, and I think the rest of council received at the public hearing.
Okay. Councillor Price.
Thank you. Yes, and I supported the motion for a change to the project. We do need to look at the public for their views. We look to the public for their views. And so I did a little bit of analysis of what came in response either prior to the public hearing and during the public hearing. And it's a little of an exact science, given that some people put more than one letter in, and some had two names on, and some spoke and put in a letter. So taking this into account and trying to count people only once, I came up with that over 60 people were opposed and 17 people indicated their support, and that included the owner and the applicant. And there was also the 238 people who signed a petition against the proposal, and about 70% of them were Comox residents and the rest were from the rest of the Comox Valley. So certainly the public hearing, and we can only look to who comes out. It's speaking for the silent majority has never been successful. The general theme that came out, and I did go through all the letters again this morning, was people do want the site developed, but they are not happy with this proposal. And the main reasons that I heard and came out in the letters was, number one, too high, inappropriate building design, trying to put too much on the site, too little parking, and that concern that it will change the rule book forever, with higher buildings being the norm, and the council unable to say no. And so there was, somebody pointed out that they were concerned it would create a canyon-like atmosphere in our downtown. And I think we do, the golf course, I don't know whether that's been responded to, but they did want to see a study of the shadow effect on the 7th and 8th tee, because they were concerned that the grass may not grow there. And, some people did question whether the viability of putting residences over a pub, which is not, it's very rare that happens. And, a pub hotel is more the norm. And I think the two comments that captured the essence were, to quote them, the building is too tall, the footprint is too big, and there is not adequate parking. And the other one was, happy to see the town moving forward with revitalization. Let's make it fit with the character of our lovely town. So those are what jumped out to me, and in the spirit of compromise, that's why I supported this, because I did hear a large amount of concern about the proposal, and people want to see it happen, but this is a primary site in the whole of Comox, and as it's been pointed out, we will live with it for a very long time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Grant.
Defer.
I just got to respond to the question, or to the comment about the golf course and the shape. Like, I'm not a scientist, but I know light moves. And I mean, so what time are we talking about? that it's shady there from 12 to 1 o'clock. I mean, you know, I don't want to dismiss any concern because they're all valid concerns. But when we're looking at using that as an example, why we shouldn't move forward because there's going to be casting a shadow on a golf course, like, you know, I think we got to come up with better than that. Like, I'm not going to sit here and try to have everybody like me. Like, I would like that. That's never going to happen. I didn't get into this gig to have everybody like me. I'm going to do the best, and to sit here and try to appease everybody, we cannot do it. None of us here can do it. And I think that's what we're trying to do here right now. We're trying to get everybody to love us. And you know what? We're here to make some hard decisions. Decisions that will affect us in 45 years from now. And in 45 years from now, do you really think a 5-story building is going to be much of an issue? No.
I'd just like to respond, Your Worship. if I could.
Well, I was up next. You make it sound as though, well, we'll just lop a story off. It's just a simple little tweak to a plan at the very 10th hour. This is a major change to this building. Major change. This will send them back to replan and redesign the entire building. There is no chance that these guys are going to go ahead if we do that. So I think that to bring this at this time, I think is wrong. I know that in public hearings, we listen to them and we make changes sometimes, but not of a major portion. You might as well just say you don't want it as do this, because there will be nothing built there.
Just
Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just in response, I think by bringing forward this compromise, Councillor Arnett, I'm probably going to be unpopular with everybody on both sides, and I don't mind that. I think that's part of our responsibility here as councillors to look at issues and to come forward. And maybe it's a difficult time to come forward. Again, I have faith in this developer in doing a good job here, and he's already demonstrated that to me. And that was after first of all, hosting the open house and making some changes that are towards a marine theme. Some people felt that they weren't enough. I felt that he demonstrated some honor in doing that. And on the contrary, I am proposing this because I'd like to see the project move forward, but move forward in conjunction with the rest of the neighborhood and the building adds form and character to our street there. I'm not going to take anything personally here either way, but that's what I see as our job, is to look things and make sure that we make the right decision before putting up a building that's going to be here for 40 or 50 years.
Okay, Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. I must say, though, that I feel very strongly that the price that we would pay for compromise is far too high. We simply cannot do it and look forward.
Any further discussion?
And I did bring up about the golf course, not that I know anything about shadows. It was a concern that came from a group, and I asked it as a question. I brought it forward, and I think that this is an open forum where all our views are respected and not and we should be free to bring it forward. When I read the letter from the golf course, it's nothing I'd ever thought of myself, and we've all gone, well, there's a golf course behind, it's not affecting anybody, so it was interesting to see that they brought that comment back. So whether it will affect, I don't know, I'm not here to, I just wondered whether that would be looked at, or, whether they were out to lunch when they wrote the letter, but I certainly wasn't going to be the judge of that.
So I would ask the CO to read back the motion, and then if we could call a question.
I have written here that the developers return with a proposal for a 4-story rather than 5-story building and continue with Comox by the Sea Maritime Heritage theme.
So then,
So,
shall we call a question? then? We call
do
a
we have
question.
to move in second?
It has been moved and seconded.
Okay, so are you ready to call the question? Are everybody clear what the question is? Okay, those in favor? Opposed? Okay, defeated.
And then I would move recommendation 1 of the planner's recommendations.
I'll second that.
Okay. Discussion? Any discussion? No? Okay.
All those in favor?
All those in favor? Opposed? Okay.
And I would move recommendation 2,
Second.
which is third reading.
Okay. Discussion?
I do want to thank everybody for the input that they've had, and this has been, I didn't think it was as contentious of an issue up until about 20 minutes ago. I thought, we heard a lot of good comments. I was quite taken aback by the taking off the floor. I do think, though, that we're going to look back, and this is going to be a good thing for our community. Sometimes it's hard to see how things are going to lay out, but a lot of times in life, I know in my life, I've looked back, and it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And in fact, a lot of times, it was a much better thing that happened. So I'm comfortable with the way it stands.
Okay. Before we go any further, it's come to my attention that we didn't vote on the... So...
No, for the second.
Oh, yeah, no, we got to vote.
No. So we need to vote on that now?
Yes.
Okay.
The second motion hasn't been voted on before you started.
You spoke before we voted.
We voted on the second motion.
Oh,
I made the
Amongst
motion.
those developed
so
agreement.
good.
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay?
that's fair.
Okay, so, those in favor? Opposed? Any further discussion?
Yes, Your Worship. Just follow on Councillor Arnett's comments that I wish the developer all the best, and we as a community will get behind what happens here, and democracy had its say, and I certainly hope and I trust that our developer is taking the feedback and will look at in the final plans and into making it a signature piece for our community.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Are we all right?
Yep, you're all right.
Okay, all right.
So now, you can just...
Listen up, all.
All right, we're going to reconvene here for the public hearing, and the agenda, if you don't have it, it's relatively straightforward, but I'll call it to order. The option agenda is for the public hearing of zoning amendment bylaw 1808 at 2116 Downey Avenue, and also to consider third reading after the closure of the public hearing. So, with that, a motion to adopt the agenda.
Moved, second.
All in favor? Motion's carried. There's a brief opening statement for the public hearing. This is convened pursuant to Section 890 of the Local Government Act. The purpose of hearing representations from those persons who believe that their interest is affected by the proposed zoning amendment bylaw 1808, which has received first and second reading but not passed third reading and been adopted by council. Notices of this hearing have been published in accordance with the Local Government Act, and copies of the proposed bylaw supporting documentation and submissions to council received from the public have been available for inspection at Town Hall. As required by the Local Government Act, to maintain order and to ensure everyone has a reasonable opportunity to be heard, ask that each person wishing to speak first sign the speaker's list located at the desk of the clerk, to my right. Once called by the chair, please begin your presentation, council, by stating your name and address. And please make the presentations as brief as possible. After all have had the opportunity to be heard, anyone wishing to have further input may once again sign the speaker's list. Council will not debate with each other or members of the public, and will not answer questions. We will hear from you. Technical questions may be directed by the chair to the staff. Everyone will be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard at this meeting. No one will be or should feel discouraged or prevented from making his or her views heard. However, please refrain from any conduct that would intimidate others or discourage them from speaking. In general terms, the purpose of bylaw number 1808 regarding rezoning application RZ 15-3, 2116 Downey Avenues to amend the R1.1 single-family zone of the zoning bylaw 1377 to allow a coach house on this property as legally described and civically at 2116 Downey Avenue. So again, any submissions in writing are to be provided to the clerk before the end of the meeting, and the bylaw is now open for discussion. So are there any speakers on the list, sir?
No.
Okay. Seeing no speakers, then I would remind those present that legal considerations prevent the members of council from considering any representation made after the closure of this hearing. And so before closing this public hearing, I'm going to call 3 times for any further speakers on any of the matters contained in the proposed bylaw. The first time, is there anyone who wishes to make any further representation? For the second time, is there anyone who wishes to make any further representation? For the third time, is there anyone who wishes to make any further representation? There being no further speakers regarding this bylaw, I declare this public hearing closed. Now, upon closure of the public hearing, we are still sitting here as a council. If council wishes, we can give a third reading to this zoning bylaw amendment at this juncture.
I'll move that.
I'll second that.
Any discussion at third reading? Seeing none? Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And that will conclude that portion of the council meeting and the public hearing. So we'll carry on now with the other matters under consideration on the agenda. I'll give you a second to get back to your agendas. So we should be under new business, and this is for 1841 Queens Avenue. It's a report from our planning department regarding issuance of a development variance permit to construct a secondary suite within a single-family dwelling to have it located beside the primary units opposed to above or below.
I would move the recommendation.
Seconder?
Second.
Any discussion? I just have one question. This house, was this the, at one time, the house for the Anglican minister? It looks like a church vestry or some kind. No, anyway. Look that way. In any event, unique house. So, any further questions? All in favor? Motion's carried. So that DVP will be issued. All right, moving on to correspondence. We have a letter from the regional district regarding next steps for Comox Valley governments to address homelessness. So, motion to receive that, and we can discuss it.
Move receipt.
Second.
On receipt, then, all those in favor? Motion's carried. All right, so our task, should the council wish to do so, is to address the matters in this questionnaire and provide feedback to the regional district by the end of this month. Of course, the results of that will be presented to the regional district committee on June 23rd. Now, it is open for council, obviously, not to necessarily answer the questionnaire, but to provide other forms of feedback. And I guess it's rather open-ended, although there's a questionnaire that they're looking for some direction. Councillor Price.
It would seem to be valuable to see what answers we agree on for the questionnaire, and maybe move each one separately.
Sure.
So I would move question number 1, would your jurisdiction support and participate in a new regional service to address homelessness? And I would move it with yes.
All right, so there's a second for that.
I'll second that.
Okay, so that starts the ball rolling on that discussion. So on that item, discussion.
Yeah.
Councillor Arnott.
What are we doing right now as the town of Comox? We're contributing money yearly into affordable housing. Maybe the CAO can help me out there.
We have, council has established an affordable housing reserve fund, and we currently have approximately $390,000 in that fund. And that is a fund that developers contribute to when they come up with new developments, as well as the town has been putting approximately $33,000 a year into it finance that fund.
So this really, I mean, this particular thing is new, but it's not new for us as Town of Comox. We have been putting money towards this initiative for years. We've helped fund the Cliff Avenue property that the regional district of the city of Courtney had. So,
Not out of the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund.
okay.
That fund, and Don, correct me if I'm wrong, that fund was for capital.
Right. The regional district established a local service, and they levied a tax for 2 years on participants. So that was part of the regional district tax levy, I believe, in 2011 and 2012.
Yes. And that, the fund that you're talking about, the 390,000, is that what you said? That we have, is that strictly for capital, or is that for?
It is for capital associated with affordable housing initiatives.
Okay, so to buy land or assist construction?
Yes, yes.
And is it limited in scope to be used within the town of Comox, or could it be contributed elsewhere?
Don, do you know if it's,
I don't think we said in the town of Comox, but
We can check on that, I guess.
we would have to check. In the normal course of business, we just do business in the town of Comox.
Fair enough. All right, Councillor Finger.
Yeah, I think that we all kind of agree that something has to be done with homelessness in the Comox Valley, and if we wait for the provincial government to come around, we'll all be gone by the time we get there. I think it's important, though, when we look at this, you know, I know Courtney debated this last night, and they spent quite a long time debating the amount of money they would debate, but they didn't actually talk very much about what the service would look like. And I think it's really important that we establish what that service is going to look like before we can even go to a referendum or do any of those kinds of things. If we don't know what it is we're going to collect the money for, I don't think that we can actually go out and collect it. Or, you know, you spoke about possibly we have this $33,000 that we may be able to put some of that aside rather than having to go to our taxpayers. But I think we really have to think about what we see that service being and what they're going to do for us before we get out there and start collecting dollars on it. So that's just my thoughts on it. And this came up at the regional district, and I had some thoughts on it at that time. And as we go through the survey, I'll come up with some of the things that we had discussed there a little bit, and see if that rings any bells for anybody. But
Question 3, I guess, is attempt to deal with some of that.
yeah.
Assuming we get past yes on question 1.
Well, and keep in mind, this is, I suppose, an expression of intent at best. It's not binding on anyone. Anytime there's a regional service established, the municipalities have to consent to its establishment. And then, of course, it's going to be funded. There's options to go to the public for various ways to fund it. So those are some procedural issues about the deal with, but I guess what you're looking for is in favor of something happening again at the regional district where it happened before, went down a certain path, and of course they're trying it again. So we'll start with Councillor Finn.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Can you clarify for the public, and so we're all operating from the same set of information, who's going to operate the service? Is it going to be government, or is it going to be a non-profit with government support, financial support? That to me is probably the first thing that needs to be sorted out.
Sure.
And it plays into this conversation because there's a new group, the Comox Valley Coalition to Reduce Homelessness, which is a whole bunch of nonprofits that may or may not be interested in moving forward to being the driver with this. So I'm wondering what other council members and Your Worship, what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I'll get the CEO to speak to what, you know, if a regional service or function, if you will, is established, what does that mean? And I guess there is some background recently with the other service, so I'll let you speak to that, and then Councillor Price.
And then I can
well, my understanding of this new service would be essentially a funding mechanism. The funds would be collected by the regional district and dispersed by the regional district, and the question is under what model, for what purpose. And I think one of the ideas that Councillor Grant was they have discussed at the regional district was to get a coalition of these organizations that consider themselves to have a lot more expertise than staff here or at the regional district have, that can provide the direction and advice as to how that money can best be spent.
Thank you, I wanted that clarified, so.
And just to be clear, I mean, if you set up a regional district function, it will appear on your tax notice as a levy to the regional district the same way, our sports and aquatic centers, our victim services, economic development, and on it goes. It would become a service again at the regional district. And they would administer that service, and there's administration cost associated with every one of those functions. So it doesn't come out without administrative cost. It's not a straight flow through. Councillor Price, then Grant.
Right, and it is to be, if it passes and we all come to agreement, it would be a regional service, and it would have to be very well defined how the money is spent. When a service is set up, it has to be very clear how it can be spent or how it can't be spent. And I think that was one of the problems with the plebiscite, because it didn't need to, because it had no legal authority and it wouldn't result in taxation. It didn't have to have that clarity. So I think a lot of people were unhappy with the plebiscite just because they didn't want 80 cents in the dollar going into administration, or what are you asking me for my hard-earned money, and where is it going to go? So we'd have to be very, very clear on that one. And I think the role of the coalition that's forming or has formed in the Valley will be a very important one. The regional district would have to administer the money because it's the caretaker of that money. But I think having the coalition for advice and because one of the problems I think we've had in the Valley is that we've gone off at different tangents and different people have gone off on different tangents. And so if we get everyone together who has a part to play in solving the problem and get them to prioritize and say, this is the project we see moving forward. This one's almost ready to go. There's money from here. We've saved up this much. I think that will make it very effective. But it would have to be the regional district ultimately that paid out that money. But I think our lack of cohesiveness has been why we've spun our wheels and why we have had so little money coming into our community. I think our only hope of really moving forward is to speak with one voice, all work together in the Valley, and look for support from outside. And that's when success has happened. We can't do it alone, but if we can get lined up, we can.
It sounds like the movie Groundhog Day to me, because, and maybe I'm a little jaded from this, from 10 years ago, when we first started discussing the same things you said, and I'm not criticizing what you said, but were said then. We have to speak with one voice. We have to show the province and the federal government that we're ready to go on a piece of property. We went through the process. We all agreed to it. We acquired a piece of property, and everyone agreed to. And then at the 11th or 12th hour, all of a sudden that property wasn't acceptable. And then, of course, that property was sold at a loss and turned into another property where a project is yet to happen. And the focus was lost there. And without pointing fingers at it, I think the town of Comox was very, very much in support of what you just said. And speaking with one voice and doing all those things, and even going through the step, which is, an important one to think about, is setting up a regional function where there is associated costs with that. And that's not to say that we haven't done things on our own account, as you know, to deal with affordable housing, whether it's secondary suites, small lots, working with Habitat and many other groups, to try to tackle the issues within the town of Comox. So ultimately, I think, in terms of what's put on the table at the moment for a motion is, do you think that we, the town of Comox, should be, again, going down that path? Once bitten, twice shy, maybe that's the way I think about it. But I also think what's important to the town of Comox and the initiatives that we've taken and the funds that we have, with all due respect, this is a Courtenay issue, principally, and we're looking at perhaps the region assisting in that. But the last time we did it, we got slapped away. And you know, I don't know how much our taxpayers should be asked to deal with that, if that's the attitude. Maybe there's a new game in town, maybe it's a new attitude, but, you know, they have their project that they're working on. They have some issues they still got to deal with, obviously, with Maple Pools. But are those things that we want our taxpayers to contribute to? That's pure and simple what it's about.
Well, yeah, when we talked about this at the regional district, my opinion was that we should try and keep government out of this as much as possible. Now, I know we would have to play a role in much as collecting the money and possibly doling it out when a project came. But it seems to me that if you look over the past 10 years, it's when the governments or the local governments get involved that things start to fall off the rails. And so if you could get this coalition to put their group together and have them do all the gnashing of teeth and figuring out of what it is and stay, from a government point of view, right out of it, have them then bring a recommendation to the regional district, if that's where this is administered, they could then decide whether that was a fundable project or a fundable thing or not. I think if you think that you're going to get money from senior government, you're probably not going to. They spend a lot of money, but they spend it in Victoria and in Vancouver. And if you look around the province and look at smaller communities, they don't get very much. So it's nice to say that it's there, but I don't believe, just from watching some of these organizations trying to get it, that there is any or very much. But I think that it's important that we, as government, stay away from it, let the coalition do their thing, and not be lobbied by these groups either. I mean, I think it's up to them to come up with that. They're the experts. They should do that. And then we should just act as the banker, and if they bring something that looks viable, then we can look at funding it. That's the model that I see. And we floated that at the regional district, and it seemed, I mean, we didn't vote on it or anything, but it seemed like there was a lot of heads nodding, and even the staff at the regional district don't particularly, I shouldn't speak for them, I guess, but it didn't strike me as they were wanting to set up the service and get into it much more than just doing that, because I think they see the same folly in it, and that they have no expertise in this file. And we just spend money and money and money and get nothing in return. So that's what we brought up there, and for what it's worth.
Thank you. That's what Ken Price.
Your Worship, I can appreciate your worry or slight worry because of past history. I'm pleased to say that I've been able to attend the Comox Valley Coalition in their initial 2 meetings, and they moved there to come up with terms of reference for their organization. It sounds like it's resurrected in spades with the coalition of all nonprofit groups in the community, and I think it's heading in the right direction, close to it. I will add that I went to Victoria to see a presentation on microhousing at the City of Victoria. Not that it's the end-all be-all, but there were 2 American presenters from Oregon, and they both started their presentation saying that first what's needed is a national housing plan. It's no different in the United States as in Canada. But after that, their successes down there were with nonprofit coalitions being the drivers of it, with municipal funding that would come to the organization that would make the decisions for it. So that's a successful one. I know there's models in Canada like Medicine Hat that take more hands-on, but my sense is that the Comox Valley Coalition is moving to elect or appoint a leadership group committee. So they're moving towards trying to be the leaders in this regard, and that's probably a good sign for our community. The good news is that loud and clear at that non-binding referendum that the public is comfortable with making donations to help our homeless, and that is that was a great validation of the big-heartedness of our community, and indeed all 3 communities in the Comox Valley.
Yeah, no, I don't doubt that genuine sentiment. I think it's just how it gets portrayed and how it's going to be pursued. And I think the coalition would support what Councillor Ken Grant has said, is that, you know, it's going to be a lot easier to support function if it comes to that, or a project or whatever, if those groups are all on side. Because, quite frankly, it fell apart last time. Not only because of that, but because the City of Courtenay didn't ultimately have the political will to do what was being proposed. The other thing is that the provincial government has made it very clear through their housing industry that they're going to fund mental health and addiction supportive housing. That's it. They're not going to get into more broader things like affordable housing and on the continuum, and certainly that's something we can carry on doing with our funds. But they're going to be very targeted, and that's the way it is. So until our community figures out where we fit on that, it's going to become difficult, and maybe that's the work of the coalition. Councillor Price.
Yes, and I think you raised some very good points about our last movement into this area, and I think it was a big learning experience and certainly not an approach to take in the future, and for lack of expertise. And this isn't about getting a social planner and centralising it. It is about creating a sum of money that can be used to make a project that's marginal, that's got many years in a transition society, and we might want to be part of the project, and then it could be the third piece that makes the project to go. So I think it's or whether it's dawn to dawn, or it will be project-based rather than trying to buy the ground and doing it ourselves. And
as I say, that's something we can do already within the town of Comox, and maybe beyond it, subject to what our bylaw says. We have funds, we can make contributions. We're already essentially taxing our residents for these kinds of things. So another option, I think, has been discussed with staff, at least at a preliminary level, is we could easily just set up a $5 or $10 parcel tax for every residential parcel in town. We have 5,500 residential parcels. We could levy a fixed $5 or $10 on each of those parcels and create $20,000 to $30,000, almost the same amount as we're contributing now, and just have that set aside without going through a regional district function and paying for all that administration. It would simply appear on our tax bill, and we'd go through bylaws to do that. But it would just, it would represent our contribution to something. So that's another route without going through the whole regional function.
Yeah, and so just so people know it, I talked to Larry today, and Mayor Council went over this for about an hour and a half yesterday, and they really spent most of their time talking about the amounts rather than the service. They came up with 5 cents per thousand
As a maximum.
as a maximum. So if you use those numbers in our town, we'd come up with about 27,500, and as you said, we're already collecting 33. So if we could either use that fund as our contribution, or perhaps another one, start another fund on a parcel tax basis. But that's what Courtney did, and
that would apply not only to residential but also commercial.
yes, well, that was another issue. Is it seems to me that commercial guys are already paying once. If they live in our town or in Courtney, they're already paying once. I would think that they shouldn't have to pay twice.
We're at 3 times the rate.
Yeah, at 3 times the rate. Yeah.
You can't establish a parcel tax on residential only.
You can or you can't?
You cannot, you can.
Yes, you can.
Okay.
So if you say $5 per residential parcel,
Okay.
in Comox, that would translate to roughly $27,500.
Right. So that makes more sense to me, since they'd already be paying on their residential.
Just a question, Ken, did that match the non-binding referendum results?
Yes, they
Were
went
they more
more.
for $10 or $5? I can't remember.
Well, I can't remember what
They went with the 5 cents. which
They
is
went with the
different.
5 cents per thousand, yeah, which is different than $5 per.
So Comox was $10.
It'd be more than $5.
But 5 cents per
Per
thousand
thousand is more.
translates, when you multiply it by the average home of 300,000, to $15 per household.
And if you get into
Gotcha.
a higher priced house,
And 10 cents per thousand is $30.
$30, yes.
So it doesn't jive with.
So,
with
yeah,
what
See,
was-
that's how functions of the regional district work. You have to set a cap, and you don't necessarily go to that cap. But you're right, the public were asked whether you support it, and then to what extent, was 0, 5, or 10? Yeah, per 300,000.
Yeah, see, my take on what I've heard from people out there is they think they're gonna pay $10 a house. This formula of 10 cents per thousand or 5 cents per thousand, I don't think that's what anyone in the public thinks is how it's gonna work.
Yeah, it's quite clear that the referendum said up to $5.
Up to 5 or up to 10.
Based on an
That's right.
average household.
So, you know, if you have a $500,000 house, which isn't that uncommon anymore, you're going to be into quite a bit more than $5 or $10.
Well, we're kind of getting into the numbers, but
Yeah,
I think,
sorry.
no, that's okay, that's important. I think the question, the motion on the floor is yes or no to a regional service. So there's that, and, you know, we've heard some comments around the table around whether we should do that or not. It's up to you, council.
Question, and I think it would relate to the regional service. So if we did it this way that the discussion is going, would Comox then hold on to this parcel of money, we'll say, and then dole it out at the end of the year? Or would it just go into a pot that the regional district, you know, the areas that the town of Comox and the city of Courtenay would go into? Or would we hold ours back? And
It depends on how this is structured. If you respond to the regional district saying that Comox supports a parcel tax on residential only, they will then in turn issue a levy and then they will collect it. If council chooses to not say or say no to a service, but say we will establish our own parcel tax, collect those funds, and then distribute them on a project basis or whatever, however you wish, you can do that as well.
to the same coalition, or to whoever we
And,
choose.
you know, essentially we've done that, I think, at least with one other function, the pesticide awareness function, where we did not participate in the levy, but we participated in the service, and we just pay on a contract basis.
Well,
You know, and just to finish mine, like, I like this idea. I mean, I like helping people, because I do believe it's everybody's issue. It's a society issue. But, there's just so many unanswered questions in this whole thing. And to have money, and, you know, we've seen it in society where we just throw money at an issue, and the issue's still there, but we're throwing money because it kind of makes us feel good that we're doing it. And I want this to work, but I want it to work for the right reasons. So.
One of the thoughts from the conversation I'm hearing is that the survey seems to be somewhat premature. And that
Yes.
if the coalition is doing their work and coming up with a plan, that is what should come forward with some idea of what costs are associated with it, so that it's known then as to who would have to pay what. Because if council goes ahead and supports the establishment of even the 5 cents per thousand, and what says that's not enough money? Are you going to then go back to the community and ask for more, or ask the coalition to revise the plan? There seems to be, I think that the survey seems to be a cart before the horse.
Well, the other thing too is that I think you have to be a little bit careful. You know, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but, you know, the coalition could come up with some plan and say, we're going to do something right in the middle of downtown Comox that all of Comox would hate, but Courtenay, Cumberland, and the regional district will all go, well, that's great. You need some form of control over how that's going from a community standpoint. I don't know how you do that.
Well, land use planning is still in our purview.
Yeah, but...
Same as it was in Courtenay.
But well, and that's the issue. I mean, you got to think about that, and perhaps keeping our money aside on our own gives us just that little bit more control over what happens with it. If they do come up with a plan that I mean, I can't imagine what it would be, but if they come up with something that we just really don't like, we can at least not send our money in for it or something. We'd have some form of control over it.
Yeah, in all likelihood, if it's focused on mental health and addiction, the services are in Courtenay, and that's where it's going.
Well, yes,
Close proximity.
but that could work any different. It could be Courtenay, and we all say, right, they don't like it, so.
Right, no, that's true. Councillor McKinnon, and then...
I think this might answer the question. In the terms of reference that was passed after the last meeting, one of their main bullets is determine a set of action priorities for the next 5 years and coordinate efforts to achieve those priorities in conjunction with all the community partners and all levels of government. So I might read is that in conjunction, you have to have the support of the local government for any of those priorities. And I think they want to address the problem that the public perception mentioned at the meeting was that they want to see something happen rather than just money being thrown at it, as was mentioned earlier. And they want to determine a set of action priorities and move forward on this.
So, I talked with Richard about this, and we talked about that whole thing, he said about having the cart before the horse. And it's hard for me to say we should take money and put it in a pot and then wait and see what the service is going to look like. I think we need to know more about what it's going to be before, we couldn't even take it to a referendum in the state that it's in now because we wouldn't even know what we were asking for our people to pay for. So I'm kind of the same ideas with this, with the survey that we've got, is that we need to know more about the direction that they're going to go and how that's going to work before we even get too much into answering some of these questions, I think.
Well, we have been given a questionnaire, it doesn't mean we have to answer it the way they've indicated. In fact, if we say no, then we don't have to answer the other question. So that'd be easy, but we could also say not yet, or maybe, or show us what this means, and then we'll talk about it. And I think, we've had some discussion around that. But the motion at this point is to say yes. Now, we haven't heard from Councillor Margan or Councillor Swift, so you have the opportunity to finish.
Well, this has been a learning experience for me, and this background going back 10 years and the history that you've brought forward, I've had vis-a-vis the newspaper. So it's good to listen to this firsthand. And as I hear the comments, I'm tending to favor, obviously, Comox taking control at this point and putting the horse before the cart at some.
Well, I can almost assure you, and I don't know if the Village of Carmel has discussed it, but based on what their mayor has done in establishing its own task force on their issues in their community, it's very unlikely that they would participate in this regional service, given their other messages around economic development and other things. That's likely they're going to go their own way. So it's really a Courtney Comox thing, and maybe some of the rural areas that we're going to be looking potentially at a regional service. So Carmelin's probably going to do their own thing, I would guess.
But the amount of money that they would be putting in the pot isn't very much either.
Wouldn't be, no.
Councillor Sawyer.
Yeah. Well, I have to think that I'm in support of dealing with homelessness. I get disturbed when I read some of these things where if we're only raising $200,000 and we need staff members, all of a sudden we're not very much of that money is getting to the ground level where it needs to be. And I think I would echo Richard's comment regarding the cart before the horse. And yet I also appreciate the other side where they can't make a plan if they don't know how much money is on the table. And I think the plan might be different depending on the amount. So I just feel like I would like to see some plan that we could really work with. And I would hope that we would treat it as a regional problem rather than just a Courtney problem, and that we would participate as a whole valley in this issue.
Another option here, other than just saying yes or no, is to say yes, subject to, and we could have an amendment to that effect to say yes, subject to the terms of the service being deemed acceptable or satisfactory, that kind of thing. Because obviously that work has to happen. Councillor Fraser.
Yes, and I think under question 3, it's certainly one of the suggestions, developing a housing trust fund. I think that would be a very valuable thing for us to have. And in the same way, it is like reserve funds. We collect money because really we can only move ahead when particularly if we want to avoid borrowing, is if there is money established. So I think that the sense was that there was the plebiscite, there was interest from the majority of people, and how do you move that forward without losing that initiative? And so, yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, Courtney has its own housing fund as well, because they do collect a per door or per unit fee from developers, and it's $1,000 a door roughly, and they've probably got as much money in the bank as we do.
Well, I think the strength of this whole thing, and when I start seeing trust funds being set up and things, kind of bothers me a little bit, because the strength of this whole thing is going to really hinge upon the strength of the coalition. And if the coalition can hold it together and bring good plans, that's one thing. But if they start fighting with each other, as we see happen, that everybody comes and they all want their thing, and they're all well-meaning, they're all good. But if they can't hold that together, then you could be putting a trust fund together here that just goes the way it's always gone, right? So I think knowing the strength and how they're going to do that is a really important piece in this.
And it should be noted as well, the city of Fernie receives casino money, roughly $600,000 a year, which they have allocated towards things like policing, but they could obviously allocate those funds to other social causes that they see fit. So there are funds out there, it's just how they get implemented and used.
I think Councillor Grant raised a good point, and I see in their values and operating principles, they address that. He said, members of the coalition agree to put aside respective goals for their individual society, agency, or association, and wholeheartedly commit to collaborating on priority needs of people who are homeless. So
We'll see how that goes.
Easier said than done.
Those are nice poem. I'll believe it when I see it.
But at least it's been up front put in.
Yeah,
That's
it's
good.
thought of it, of course, yeah.
No, and I commend them for putting that together, because that is the biggest challenge.
And that's a big step.
So, the motion on the floor is to say yes, unless there's an amendment coming forward, we could vote on the motion as presented, if you're ready. So you ready for the question? Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, step one.
Subject two. You're a lawyer, you start putting in the blanks.
Well, question two is, the maximum taxation rate your jurisdiction would support. And this is where they've given us a couple of options, but of course, we can come up with another option. So that might be where we say, for the town of Comox, X dollars per parcel, as opposed to this, and per residential parcel perhaps, as opposed to this other amount, which would be in excess of what the plebiscite amounts were.
Well, now, but this is where we start getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, I think, because...
Well, this is what we would support in principle. We would still have to go through public process
Yes.
and all that. So it doesn't
Support
mean
in principle.
But the problem is, for me, when I look at this, this is the beginning, not the end, right? I mean, it's not going to be $5 or $10. That's going to be where it starts, and every time they come back, it's going to be more and more and more.
Okay.
So that's one danger we have to be aware of when we do this too. So
I think with
that's why I wonder, until we know what they're going to do.
Well, yeah, it's chicken and egg.
It's
I mean,
chicken and
they're
egg.
going to want to know if there's money there to do something ahead of time.
And we want to know what they're going to do before we start
So
collecting money.
I think what they're asking us is, what do we reflect from perhaps the plebiscite results, or the feeling in our community as to the level of contribution that people would be willing to make? If it was $5 or $10 per average house, we could say that, and we could collect it ourselves and contribute it, or just tell the regional district, you levy that.
Well,
Or not.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, and I think you've answered this, but this questionnaire is not binding.
Absolutely not.
Okay. Who made this questionnaire up?
The regional district.
No, I don't think they did. No.
It's part of their report.
It might be part.
That's
I
what
think
I'm
it came
wondering.
from I saw this before. This came from that nurses group, I believe.
No, they've answered the question for us,
Yes.
Yeah.
as did others who sent letters. So,
Okay.
So no, this came from the regional
Maybe
district.
that's where I saw it.
Councillor Arnott, you finished?
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Price, and you're
And if it was by means of a regional district service, once it's in there, whether it's $5 per household or $10, it can't be changed, can it? Because it needs to have,
without going through another process.
without going through another process. So the public has to agree to increase that amount. So we have to do the first step of agreeing to take it to the public. So I don't think we're in danger of getting caught in something that could then increase. Sometimes we can in other services where there's a cap of,
Well,
we can go up to
this is why they're suggesting a cap. They probably wouldn't spend all that, but they would give that, if it was a function, the flexibility to go that high, without having to go back to the public.
Yes, and I think Dawn can speak to this as well. You're not just limited to the per thousand ratio. You can even if you wanted to direct the regional district, you could say we would prefer a parcel tax with a specific number attached.
That's what it says under option 3, another amount, please describe.
Yeah. So could you just explain to me what the viability of taking the affordable housing contribution that we already have at 33,000, because if we did the 5 cent per thousand, roughly comes to 27.5.
No, you got that mixed up.
5 cents per thousand.
No, it's okay, $5 a house, sorry.
$5 per parcel.
Yeah,
per
$5
residential parcel.
per parcel, sorry, that's what I meant. Would be 27.5, and we're already collecting 33. Can we use that money for this, or would, you may not have the answer for that right off the top of your head.
You can, again, it depends on how this thing is structured, because if you consent to the establishment of a reserve fund or a service at the regional district, they will do the levy, and we pay that levy, and then we just, it's essentially a pass-through that goes to the taxpayer directly. If you are saying that you don't want to participate in that service, but you'll still
We'll send you.
provide a financial contribution equal to whatever,
Yeah.
that's something else you can suggest.
Well, that's my thought.
As we've done that under contract for the emergency program as well. We are not a participant in the service, but we are under contract and we contribute a valuation as we were under that.
So if we're already collecting the money, maybe we don't have to collect it twice, maybe we can just reapportion what we're already collecting. That was my question.
And then we're in control of it more than we would be the other
Yeah,
way.
it's under contract, I mean, we might enter into possibly, what, we do a maximum 5-year contract, but usually it's year to year, right?
I like that.
So, I mean, in terms of, should a new service be established, what's the maximum tax ratio? We could say, rather than option 1 or 2, we could say
All of the above.
an amount by contract equivalent to $5 per residential parcel.
And that comes to roughly 27,000.
Sorry to jump in, Your Worship, but your answer to number 1 was yes, you want to, in principle, support and participate in a new regional
We
service.
can do that by contract.
No, participants pay taxes. Contractors are outside.
Well,
They're not part of the service,
Clarify.
and they have an arrangement on the
yeah,
side.
okay, I get what you're saying. I'm just saying that I think what we want to do potentially is, rather than having the RD levy something against their taxpayers, is that we simply enter into a contract with them. Yes. For the amount that we're already collecting.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
It's not binding.
it's their bloody
Yeah.
questionnaire,
Yeah.
with all due respect. It doesn't, we don't have to be stuck by its constraints.
That sounds like a lawyer talk to me.
It's a bit of a schmuck.
So it's $5 per household is what?
Well, that's what I'm suggesting, per residential
Yeah,
parcel.
that's what I was, in light of what Courtney's done, that seems to be fair.
We can say that our, quote, participation would be limited by way of contract, and however we want to wordsmith that after me. They'd have to come to us with, a formal consent to a bylaw establishment, right? And then we'd say, no, we're not participants, we are financial supporters.
Contractors.
Yes?
I guess I just wonder whether we could give people that choice of $5 or $10. I think a lot of people, because they didn't know what the money was going to be used in the plebiscite, a lot of people, that's why some people voted against it entirely, and some people just said, oh well, I'll throw in $5.
Yeah.
I just wonder, for myself, I have a small income, but $10 a year.
Well, people can
couple of
make
coffees.
contributions like many of us do towards,
Okay.
charities. I mean, you can make your own contribution to the town of Comox and get a tax receipt for it, above and beyond your taxes. So, I think we're trying to take the middle ground of where the plebiscite was. $5 per average household, that's sort of middle ground. Somebody wants to write a check for $100 or $200, they can.
Yeah, it's still being charged.
And if we do go to the $10, then we would have to go back to the parcel tax idea. rather than using the
Right,
site.
'cause we
Because
don't-
we
we
don't
haven't-
have enough money, right?
Okay, yeah, so just, what was it?
So essentially, we're talking about a equivalent amount,
Yeah.
that $5 parcel tax would
Yeah.
enable. These are just words thrown around. Do you have anything before you craft as a motion?
What I've written down is an amount by contract equivalent to $5 per residential parcel.
So is somebody care to move that?
I'll move that.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion on that? All those in favor? Motion's carried. We'll make sure our Director of Finance keeps us out of jail on that one. When it comes to the participation side. So question 3, I don't know if you wish to delve into that one. I think that's the work of the coalition, quite frankly.
Yes.
I think that's all the above again, the last one.
And number 4 doesn't apply to us, right? That's the converted values and all that. So we've just answered 1 and 2. I think the rest is,
Well, and
unless people want to delve into number 3.
well, number 5 would be, do you want to go to a referendum or alternate approval process? And I think in light of the way the non-binding referendum question was asked and the discussion that we've had, I think there's only one way to proceed, and that would be to go to a proper referendum.
But that'll only be if we were levying new taxes or not.
True. Okay, so we don't need, so should we don't need an answer for that at all then?
Now, there's a process when they establish a function, they get consent from council, so that.
Yeah, so come on.
So no referendum required.
Not, because
Not
we're
from us.
already contributing to our own fund $32,000 a year, and we wouldn't exceed that.
This is a contract.
Yeah, we're not asking the taxpayers.
Right? Any further on the questionnaire? Okay, we'll move on. Thank you for that discussion, and staff will take it from there. Okay, that brings us to the second item, the 7th Annual Show and Shine and Poker Run.
We move receipt of that?
And granting of permission.
Yeah, they ask, yeah, and grant them their permission.
Okay, anything further? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Similarly, the Nautical Days 4-mile road race on Nautical Days.
Second,
Granting
and
of
grant
permission.
permission?
And as always, they always ask about any major road construction. Are they going to be running down the route? I don't think they're running the road.
We won't be doing the work on that this year.
Okay. Good enough.
Sounds good, and the longest continuously held foot race in BC, that's quite an
It doesn't go
achievement.
through a traffic circle, so people won't be going around.
Where do I get off?
Really good. All those in favor? Motion's carried. And lastly, the letter from the Comox Valley Airport Commission seeking our input on the appointment of Director Richard Clark.
So I would move receipt and should we send
Support?
support? Yes.
I'll second that.
All right, so all those in favor? Motion's carried. He's also, by the way, involved with London One.
Yeah.
Okay, no other items on the agenda, delegations, reports from members of council. We'll start with Councillor Swift.
Okay, mine's really short. I attended the Sewer Advisory Commission last week, and I'm going to leave it at that, simply because most of the meeting took place in Canada. So I expect we'll be able to rise and report in the June 23rd meeting. And I attended the Elected Officials Forum on Climate Change. And as always, it's good to get together with everybody in the room and have conversations. And just a reminder for all of us, tomorrow is the Hildred's Showcase of their season's events. So 4 estates on Hildred grounds, and hopefully it'll be sunny.
Councillor Price.
Yes, I attended the Sewer Commission and also the Water Committee, and we did receive a letter from the Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Charmaine Enns, about the number 2 spillway coming into Perseverance Creek, and there is a strong indication that that could be contributing to turbidity, and so the Medical Officer of Health has set a very tight timeline for us to deal with it. I think analyse, plan and construct by September, which is a challenge, given that it's private land and there's no service that covers the cost. So we are, Director Bob Wells as the chair and myself as the vice chair and Mark Breton and Deborah Oatman are going to be visiting with MLA Don McCrae tomorrow just to see what assistance we can get. And I suspect that there'll be money coming from the province, but it was a very serious letter. Also the Sports Commission, there was an update on the curling rink. It is being ripped apart, but it will be ready in time for Music Fest, is the word. And I also attended the Committee of the Whole. The good presentation from TELUS on small cell technology upgrades in the Anderton Road, Ryan Road area. And they point out the importance of cell technology, that 60 to 70% of emergency calls are now made from cell phones, so getting good connectivity. And this, I think you saw pictures, very small, size of a laptop. And we also had a presentation from Kelly Daniels, who's working with the KFN, and wanting to see if they can be part of the water system. They want to know prior to treaty signing, because they've got a lot of interest in what was the old Sage Hill property, now known as the Southlands, and they can also bring a water allocation from Comox Lake with them. And we also talked about carbon offsets and agreed to go with one of the cheap ones, the Utah at $1.50 a metric ton, to cover most of our carbon offset, and then use the rest for going through the marketplace. The community carbon marketplace is being set up in the Comox Valley, and also Comox Valley Sports Centre retrofit. And Edwin Green brought forward a regional parks function idea, Tillotson and I know. I don't know if that really went anywhere.
Okay.
And then the Electoral Officials Forum on climate change. And climate is changing faster now than in the last 800,000 years. And shared the teleconference for the ABICC Special Committee on Solid Waste Management. We've got 9 regional districts involved, and the Comox Valley is playing a leadership role. Learned about how accessible our main street is yesterday, going out with Karen in a wheelchair, and realised the bumps we have in our sidewalk. And Karen suggested it sounded like a great idea that maybe our planning department would like to go out with her, or maybe Marvin, because there's nothing like being in a wheelchair to look at how do you get into this building. So she's very willing.
They'll get the one with no brakes, right?
Yeah. Right now, before you got to the elevator.
All right, thank you. Just a quick question on the issue around water, Perseverance Creek. Is the Village of Cumberland involved in this meeting tomorrow?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, they obviously are going to be involved in the solution, but no,
Well,
they're not.
Some might say they were involved in the problem too.
Well, and that was brought up at the water meeting, if I may interject
Yes.
a little bit, and I did ask about that because it seems that there was some issues with logging and also some damming of one of the tributaries up there. And I did ask the question, who's going to pay for all this? And what's their involvement going to be in mitigating this problem? Because I don't even know how you're going to mitigate the bank up there. That's almost the impossible task. But it goes a little bit farther than that in that we need to now get a water treatment plant because of our boil water advisory. And the reason we got the boil water advisory goes back to all of this. So how much are they willing to put into that as well? So that was brought up.
Well, I know in speaking to Minister McCrae a couple months ago, he was quite anxious to have this discussion unfold, so I'm glad that you're going to have it with him. He did indicate there was some money there, so it'll be enough to do something. All right, back and forth here, Councillor.
Yeah, well, I didn't do nearly as much as that, I don't But I went to the elected officials forum on the environment, and that's all I'll add.
Councilor McKinnon?
Yeah, just a few things. Hats off to Salish Seafood, who hosted the Yana Barbecue. I attended on May 9th, May 11th. I went to the micro-housing workshop in Victoria, and I just add about that is that the mayors of both communities and the police chiefs of both communities were very reluctant about supporting this concept when it first started. And after 2 or 3 years, they have come full circle, and they've seen a decline in crime, benefits, and I have some information on that if people would like to access it. But it was very encouraging. Attended the Comox Valley Social Planning Committee meeting on May 12th, the Elected Officials Forum on Climate Change, the Comox Valley Homeless Coalition. I mentioned I was at their meeting, Celebration of Life for George Cochran. Comox Fire Department had kudos to them. They had a Yana barbecue on Saturday. And finally, on the Empire Days Cumberland Parade, my nephew was visiting, and I were participating in the parade with signs saying Comox salutes Cumberland. So we've got good, we built up bonus points with Cumberland for the next 5 years.
You got any salutes? Councilor Grant?
Thank you. I attended a sign committee meeting. For all of you that remember, we were looking at building a new sign, and we have gotten a little bit more design work back now. We're just going out and checking and making sure that all our in-kind donations are still as they should be. So we're hoping to see something begin to unfold there relatively quickly. I attended the sewer commission meeting, but it was in camera, so I can't talk about it. Barbara talked about the water and the Perseverance Creek issue. Also chaired the sports commission meeting, and at that meeting, you forgot to tell me about a Zamboni?
I had it written down.
Yeah. And I also attended the climate change for elected officials forum.
Is it that bad that we have to buy the Zamboni? Climate
got
change?
two.
Yeah.
Instead of street sweepers, we get a Zamboni.
Thank you. All right, moving from Zambonis to
To the other grant. I attended a seniors meeting, and put together a little bit of communication between all of the good things that Al Fraser is doing for the seniors in the way of building, and connecting it with council. So Al and I communicate prior to my attending a board meeting, so I know what work he in fact has done, and then I go and ooh and ah and do all the wonderful things to see how well the job has been done, and of course obviously the seniors are pleased with the whole communication, so it's working really well. Also, the membership is up to close to 800.
Wow. Also
Also attended and now learn a great deal more about climate change, and more than that, wheeling with Karen. That was an experience. I mean, you've done that
Not yet.
many times before. We heard
Yeah,
about you and
once.
all around. Yes. Well, I don't know if I can hold a pen for a while now because my hands are sore, but it was really an enlightening experience.
Well, I know it was wheelchair basketball and wheelchair rugby.
Oh, that's what it was, yes, she told me. She was trying to convince us that we should perhaps go dancing with her, but neither of us jumped at the opportunity. It was an excellent and, a very good experience, and certainly puts a whole new perspective on living life in a wheelchair, that is for sure.
All right, great. I'll just report briefly. Following my appearance at Aspen School Leadership Assembly, they asked me to come out with their Tri-K students on a bike ride a couple Fridays ago, and the kids were quite excited, and we just kind of did around the school a couple times in that neighborhood, and all fired up, ready to go for the Tri-K. Something also about wheels, these went on people's feet. I was asked to blow the first whistle for the Battle of the Betties, which is the roller derby at the Sports Center. I tell you, if you haven't relived the 70s recently, you should go back there and watch them when they duke it out. They had a lot of fun, and they get all geared up, and they had a team from Whistler come in, and they played the local team. And I have no idea how they score points, but I watched, and they had a lot of fun there. And
They do a lot of charity work, don't they?
They do, yeah. And it brought me back to, as I say, the 1970s, watching it on TV. I didn't see Skinny Minnie Miller anywhere.
Oh, there, Rupert. Not that I watched.
But it was fun. Elected Officials Forum on Climate Change Adaptation. I was appointed as well to the Climate Leadership Team at Premier has put together a bunch of academics, business people, and then 3 local elected officials, Mayor Hetner, myself, and Mayor Barnes Lake, Luke Stringle. We haven't met yet, but we're promised a very intensive series of meetings over the next 6-7 months to try to give the government some guidance on Climate Action 2.0 before they go to Paris, I think, in December. So I might lean on you to go to a few more of the regional meetings if I'm otherwise occupied. So that will be interesting. I'll report back on that as we meet. We haven't met yet. A couple celebrations of life. One for Gary Wilston, of course, one of the contractors who work economic development, the agricultural side of things. We're going to miss him dearly. And of course, Mayor Carter. And then the Cumberland Parade, as always, a great event. And attended the lunch and spoke on behalf of the town, and the Consul General there from there, from China was there. And was well attended actually by mayors from Campbell River through to Port Alberni. So it's a nice event as always. Nothing further on reports. Then media questions. They're all done.
Not here.
Public questions. There's still a few members of the public here, so I don't know if there's any questions related to the agenda. Okay. So that would be the agenda for tonight. A motion to adjourn would be in order.
Move.
Second.
All in favor?